All right, so if you know anything about the US political system, then you're probably already fully aware of the corruption that is seeped into every single aspect of it. Usually we talk about the executive and the legislative branches and how our elected officials take donations, which are really just bribes, and then they use those bribes to then go and enact legislation on behalf of those corporate interests. But what we don't usually talk about as much is the judicial side of this and how corporate America has infiltrated our judicial branch. And so I have a story here that basically is one of the most important stories that nobody is really talking about, or at least the mainstream media is not giving nearly enough attention to, because this is an example of corporations, specifically Chevron, basically holding someone as a political prisoner. Okay, this is one of the first examples that I have seen that is a clear-cut example of a corporation prosecuting and holding an individual hostage, essentially, over bullshit charges that they have been allowed to bring by our judicial system. So this is a really fucked up situation. So I want to read you some of the details, and it does get a little bit complicated and twisted here, but it's really simple when we take a step back and analyze the entire situation. So let's go ahead and read some of the details first. So as The Intercept previously reported, Donziger, who is this environmental activist and lawyer who basically went down to Ecuador and won this case against Chevron for them polluting a massive area that's the size of Rhode Island, and they blatantly and brazenly polluted this area, destroyed habitats, destroyed farmland, and harmed indigenous people in the Amazon, and he won a case against them, and that's sort of what sparked this entire witch hunt against them. So he's an environmental lawyer, and Donziger was charged with contempt of court for refusing to hand over his computer, cell phone, and other electronic devices in August of 2019, and has since been on house arrest in his Upper West Side apartment in New York City, although no attorney without a criminal record in the federal court system has ever before been detained pre-trial for a misdemeanor offense. Donziger has been confined in his home for 21 months for the misdemeanor charge, and if convicted, he could face 6 months in prison. He has been in prison he has been under house arrest for 21 months. Okay, as they just point out here, this has never happened. This is completely unprecedented, and it's basically at the command and at the discretion of Chevron and their lawyers and their teams and their judges. So here's the continuation of this story. The contempt case stems from a long and twisted legal saga that began in 1993 when Donziger was part of a team that filed a class action lawsuit against Texaco, now Chevron, on behalf of more than 30,000 farmers and indigenous people in Amazon over the massive contamination from oil drilling. Chevron became involved when it bought Texaco in 2001. So the initial litigation over pollution in the Amazon was held in the Ecuadorian court, which doesn't have juries, and a 2011 racketeer influenced and corruption organizations, or RICO, suit that Chevron filed against Donziger initially sought $60 billion in damages. Such suits seeking damages entitle a defendant to a jury, but Chevron dropped the monetary claims 2 weeks before the trial, and as a result, no jury was present. In August, Judge Loretta Preska, who is overseeing the contempt trial, denied Donziger's request to have a jury present and also denied his request to stream a video of the trial. So he doesn't get a jury, he doesn't get to live stream the trial, no public awareness of what's going on there. Litigation between Donziger and Chevron, whose consultants acknowledged a plan to demonize the environmental lawyer in 2009, had been overseen by Judge Lewis A. Kaplan. The judge had asked the U.S. attorney to prosecute Donziger for the contempt charge. The federal attorney, Jeffrey Berman, had declined to do so. And so in a move that appears to be completely unprecedented, Judge Kaplan appointed a private law firm to handle the prosecution in July of 2019, bypassing the standard for random assignment process. Kaplan then handpicked the judge who would oversee the case, Preska. So instead of going by the typical channels and doing a random assignment for the judge in this case and allowing him to have a jury, this Judge Kaplan specifically chose Preska to oversee the contempt charge. Now, this is where it gets a little bit spicy here, okay? So Donziger and his team have repeatedly pointed to ties between Preska and Chevron, noting that the judge is a member of the Federalist Society, a conservative legal organization that has received funding from Chevron. And although Chevron is not a party to the current contempt litigation, the prosecution's witnesses have included attorneys for Gibson Dunn, which has represented Chevron in litigation against Donziger, and had dozens of meetings with the private prosecutions now prosecuting the contempt cases. Chevron did not immediately respond to a request for comments. So, basically, to summarize all of that, you have a man who was part of the prosecution or part of the case that was successfully won against Chevron, which resulted in $9.5 billion that should have been paid to these Ecuadorian people that had their environment, their habitat, their homes destroyed by this rampant pollution. So you have a situation where you have a massive corporation like Texaco or Chevron that goes into the Amazon, pollutes it completely indiscriminately without any regard for the native habitats, without any regard for the indigenous populations, disgusting abuse of corporate power in this situation, and a total disregard for the environment, and that's obviously to be expected from a corporation like Chevron. So they go in, they destroy the environment there. Then an environmental lawyer goes in with another team, and they successfully win this case against Chevron. And since then, Chevron has basically been doing a witch hunt to silence and prosecute this man. And he's currently been held in house arrest, like they said, for over 600 days. Over 600 days, unable to go and live his life and do his normal job and everything like that. So they're holding him as a political prisoner for a misdemeanor offense. The misdemeanor offense, again, by the way, was refusing to hand over his computer and his cell phone records to the prosecution, right, that is corrupted by their ties to Chevron. So Chevron has a complete disregard for human life in the Amazon, and basically what Donziger is saying by not wanting to hand over his information in this circumstance that led to the charge of contempt of court is, why would I give this prosecution, this judge that are clearly corrupted by their ties to Chevron, why would I give them access to all of this information that could literally jeopardize the safety and the actual lives of my clients that I was representing in Ecuador? So I think that seems like a fair claim to say, I don't want to give up my all this information of my clients to these private corporations, basically. And so you have a situation where you have a massive private corporation that is holding an environmental lawyer hostage, held up in his home for a misdemeanor offense, and it all stems back to that original case against Chevron, because they don't want to pay the $9.5 billion that's owed. They don't want to have to give reparations. They don't want to have to allow these people to rebuild their habitats. And so really what this is about is precedent. Okay, this case, the immediate solution that could be done is Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, has to step in and prosecute this case. That's what he has been asking for, Donziger. He's literally asking, please have the federal government prosecute me in this case, because I don't want basically a private firm to be doing this when they have ties to Chevron. It's a very basic request, and it really just gets to the heart of corruption within our political system. Again, we don't usually talk about the judicial side of this, but it's just as important, if not more important, than the other ones, because if we have this corporate bleeding, this interference with our ability to have fair court proceedings, then I mean, we can't even have the veneer of a just justice system. So that's the situation that we have right now. This is obviously an ongoing situation, but Merrick Garland has to take this case, right? They have to bring it up, review it, and point out the flaws in this, because it's absolutely ridiculous. This sets a terrible precedent. If he manages to be convicted and sent to prison, then think about what that does to all other environmental activists and lawyers who are trying to fight on behalf of indigenous people against corporations who have destroyed their lands, destroyed their environment, destroyed their livelihoods. So this is a really important case. We're going to keep I'm going to keep you updated on it as it progresses. And yeah, this is just absolutely egregious actions, overreach by Chevron, and it gives you a really good idea of the infiltration of our judicial system by these corporations, not only in the executive and the legislative branch, but it's also coming straight to our court systems as well.